Hello, Serie A Chronicles listeners. It is Tuesday, the 9th of January. It is 2 minutes to 2 o'clock. I'm breaking the first rule of podcasting by telling you exactly when we're recording. But today we're going to try something a little bit different. But first and foremost, before I bring in my illustrious co-hosts, Mina Rizuki and Nikki Bandini, I'd like to start by saying please give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. It really does help us to be found. For our Chronicles Tifosi patrons, please make sure you join in the Patreon app, especially as we have had some fairly vocal patrons recently, and that led us to doing a special extra bumper episode whereby we spoke all about 2023, 2024, best and worst moments, and so on and so forth. But we are here. We have reached the midway point of the season, the Giro di Boa, when all of the Serie A teams get halfway out to sea and then go round the buoy and head back to shore. And so it's time to take stock, Mina Rizuki. 19 matches played, Inter atop. Did you expect that?
Okay, can I just say, if there was ever a meme on that, tell me you're on a podcast with a commentator without telling me you're on a podcast with a commentator. It was you starting that off, and I had to take my headphones off. I nearly went deaf.
Yeah, I was booming there.
Your voice is so booming.
Sound down. I think we should put a little sound down warning on that. But anyway.
I also want to know, Mina, how often in your life you've been described as illustrious. I think I quite like it.
Oh, Nikki, are you
with the illustrious
You're
colleagues.
just as illustrious with your illustrious colleagues.
Flattery will get me everywhere, I'm told.
Nikki, I don't know, but for me it's quite often, okay?
Just everyone. Family dinner.
Yes, that's regularly how my parents describe me. Their illustrious daughter.
Imagine that. That would be great. I mean, there's proud parents and there's taking it a bit too far, isn't there? But there we go. My daughter, Mina Rizuki of the BBC. Anyway.
I wish. More often than not, it's the one who disappointed me.
We'll save that for a bonus.
It's a joke, by the way. It's a joke, guys. Anyway, but what we're talking about? Oh yeah, Juventus, Inter. Ooh, Inter. You know what I think is very interesting about this is that people often want the limelight, but you don't understand what happens when you are always a winner, and that you attract so much more criticism than you believe you deserve. And that's what happens when you win often. It's a little bit like the Real Madrid story, right? Everyone hates Real Madrid. They have that greedy owner, Florentino Perez, who just wants money. You know, they're just a team that play terrible football, but sometimes always win. And everyone loves to hate them because they're winners. Everyone loves to hate Manchester City. And what Inter don't understand is that when you are in the limelight, you're going to get the same treatment as what Juve would get, which is, oh, is this a fake league? Are you cheating? What's going on? And I know they're really angry about it, but this is what happens when you win, and you should love it. You should, welcome it and ignore it. So I do kind of think.
Why is this going towards Juve? This isn't about Juve. This is about Pazza Inter through and through.
Here.
I've never seen a more Pazza Inter enter a game than that enter the game. I mean, first of all, the sort of...
I guess it was the fans' reaction. I think that was... Sorry, that's what I meant.
Sure. I suppose I should sort of... Let's do a very speedy recap for people who didn't see it, because Inter beat Verona 2-1 to stay top of the table. But my goodness, was it dramatic. 1-0 up in the first half, wasn't it, when Lautaro scored. Lautaro comes back, he scores, it all looks like it's Inter back to doing business. Then second half, on comes Arnautovic for Inter at the same time as Henry comes on for Verona. Arnautovic proceeds to have one of the most spectacularly awful cameos you can imagine.
Don't worry, we'll get to Pasquale Mazzocchi as the pod wears on. It was a pretty good battle between the two.
That's true. That is true. But yes, Arnautovic, who not only sort of fluffs his chance to score in injury time, but also blocks a shot on the goal line for Inter.
Well, he was brought in to replace Lukaku, wasn't he? So that's possibly why.
That's true.
Oh, Patrick.
Oh my God, Patrick, that's savage.
Oh, savage. And everyone says, I'm savage. Oh, Patrick.
Wow, that was
Got to get the
mean.
claws out as
But
well
just to
sometimes.
finish,
But
just to
quite
finish for people who
warranted.
didn't see it, because Inter then won the game in injury time. Davide Fratesi scores after this sort of chaotic attack, and in the middle of it all, it looks very much like Bastoni sticks his elbow into a defender and doesn't get picked up on it. After which, Verona also win a penalty, which doesn't initially get awarded. Ball goes down the other end of the pitch. Inter failed to score an open goal. Then VAR calls it back. Then Henry hits the post. It was one of the maddest ends to a football game that I can remember.
Pazza Inter.
They are crazy.
Yeah.
They are crazy. And it brings a new meaning to the word for Inter and Juventus jostling for position, I think, with Bastoni sort of nudging his way into Andre Duda. But I want to imagine a parallel universe, because I've got a feeling that if Inter actually score with that breakaway, so Monty Po has come up for the last kick of the game. It's the 98th minute, whatever it is. Verona toss it into the box. Their goalkeeper is out way down in the Inter box. Inter win the ball back. Barella's running clear. Rather than just rolling it into an empty net, he decides to try and square it for Alexis Sanchez, but he has to wait for Alexis to get back on side before he can do so. Then Yaya Calon charges back and wins a slide tackle. It goes out for a corner. Only then, with the ball going out of play, does VAR intervene. I've got a feeling in a parallel universe that if Inter score that goal, if either Barella rolls it in or he plays it properly to Alexis and he scores, Inter go 3-1 up. Such is the injustice, because then the VAR would have intervened anyway and awarded the penalty. I've got a feeling Verona score that penalty. I know it's a really odd, counterintuitive sort of idea. I don't know. Is there any, merit to that at all? Or just me?
It would be different, wouldn't it? Because everyone would be angrier. Everyone's anger levels would be in a completely different place. Like, both teams would be furious. Inter would be furious because they think they just scored and had it taken away from them. Verona would be furious because they'd be still saying, how could you let them stick the ball in the net when we did this? So it would be different. I don't know if I can say whether or not it would be a goal or not, because in the end it wasn't a penalty save, was it? Omri just missed the target. So would being more angry have made him more likely to hit the target? I don't know if I can go there.
Do you know what I mean? That added relief though. You've gone from 3-1 down to suddenly a chance to go 2-2, really. I don't know. It feels like a big swing.
Does it take away the pressure, though? That's the question. Because isn't it just a question of pressure that he feels right now that he's got the penalty to make it 2-2, to get a point for his team, and he's feeling all this pressure, and you could see on his face he looks like he's ghosted himself, like he's become white as he's standing over it. And then you're thinking, I knew straight away that he's going to miss it. And I'm just wondering, isn't it the same amount of pressure if he's come back to still make it 2-2, even if they've gone up 3-1, and then
Possibly,
they have a chance
even
to
more
now
pressure
cancel.
And I do wonder whether his friends and family ghosted him after the match and just went quiet on the text. It was gone from sort of congratulatory.
But he did get a lot of abuse.
Yeah, he did, to be fair.
He got a lot of abuse, and I think this is the horrible thing that we see in football now. It's just ridiculous abuse
as well, which is it's a shame, really, because it's been a great
story. Goal, so
with his first touch,
I mean, he scored the goal. In all honesty, he gave Verona a chance to get out of this. To get to get a draw effectively. So I think he deserves the recognition that he tried at least, and not everyone scores penalties. My God, I mean, Osimhen's missed them, so it's not. And he's the best striker in Serie A, although now Lautaro Martinez won't be giving him a run for his money. But I think the better question, but did you see DeMarco, and his celebrations as well? That was but then he came out and said, if you know me, you know that I didn't do that and I'm sorry. And then there was this whole thing. But putting that all aside, do we see chinks in Inter's armour? Or is this just a case of, I mean, this is where the question is they're so dependent on Lautaro Martinez because he's so good. Is enough coming from the rest of the team? Are we getting goals from the midfield? Because there's been a lot of talk about that. Are we getting enough goals from everyone else? Marcus Thuram seems to be a different player when he's not with Lautaro Martinez. Arnautovic and Alexis Sanchez, regardless of what Arturo Vidal has to say about Sanchez, are not exactly two wonderful players to have. And I thought Gazzetta made a really good point when, if you look down at Bergamo, and they've got 5 different players to choose from going forward, and Inter have these 2 guys and pretty much nothing else, is this going to be a problem going forward?
I I can't stop thinking about when you talk about celebrations, the fact, by the way, that Fratese's celebration up on the stand, and I read that Inter photoshopped
They did.
the picture they
They
posted.
did.
They didn't want people to see as much of his bum.
Just in case
Sorry,
you
that just
wondered
was a
whether
sidetrack
Italy
from
suffers
Team
from Catholic
celebration.
guilt, yes, they did Photoshop the thing. It's like having a crucifix in every
I
classroom
do
in
think
school.
you have to do that.
Do you?
I don't want my kid to see Fratese's bum.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I was sorry when I was thinking about that did flow from the thought of you talking about goals, Mina. It wasn't just, I'm not just completely obsessed with Fratese's bum. Fratesi and the fact that he scored a goal off the bench again, which, he's such a fascinating sort of case this season, because I feel like Fratese's stock is going up. I feel like initially, generally, because of how he's done for the national team, people are thinking more of him, but he's still only started one game all season for them. And it feels a bit like, what does he have to do to get the opportunities? Then you look at that midfield and you go, well, who are you pulling out of it?
Mkhitaryan, that's who you're
Mkhitaryan,
pulling
Barella,
out.
Çalhanoğlu.
No, Mkhitaryan, you have to.
Or
yeah,
Mkhitaryan.
well, that would be my
Absolutely.
answer.
Oh, but guys, come on. Çalhanoğlu looks exhausted. Like, the guy is like a shadow of the player that started this
Yeah,
in
but
the
he's
season.
the
He was
deep line
brilliant. And then
playmaker. You
now, in the
need-
last 4 or 5 matches,
It's a different role, though, isn't it?
he needs to rest. He needs like 3 days
you
off.
have to play Aslani, basically. Or Davy Klaassen, maybe. But, I mean, even then.
So play them. But this is the question. You have the squad depth, and you're not
On
using it at
paper,
this
you do.
point
I
when the
wonder-
guy is already gassed at this stage.
I wonder whether Inzaghi's not using it
Wait, one
because he
second.
doesn't trust them.
But then this is the point. There's no point having a great bench when you're not going to play any of your players, and there is no squad depth to be utilizing at this point. Your squad depth can't be used to introduce like players on the 80th minute because you've already won the game. Your squad players are supposed to be what carry you over the season and how you rotate properly and efficiently and to get them to the level up. Like, this is where we have an issue, I think, with Inter, because they need to use that squad depth properly. I don't know if they will, but at the end of the day, Fratesi is a great midfielder, and Aslani, everyone talks about as being a great midfielder in the future, but he's not being given chances at this point to show that. I mean, Traore's come on for Milan and he scored 2 goals in his last 2 games, and he's a kid, but that's what it means to use your bench.
The stakes are lower for Milan.
And this is my worry.
The stakes are lower for Milan. They're not.
Sure, are they lower?
They're not in the title race, to be honest. They're 9 points back. Chaka Traore played in the cup where most teams rotate, and then he came off the bench when they're already 2-0 up and scored the third.
Patrick, it's Verona. It's Verona. You should be able. Come on, they're not playing Barcelona at this point. And Aslani played against Barcelona.
And he missed a crucial goal that would have sent Inter through with a few matches to spare. I seem to recall
Fine, he was up against Araujo. He's not up against Araujo.
You said it's only against Verona.
We're talking about
the pressure got to Inter, I think, didn't they? They needed that late goal. Even then, they could have conceded with that penalty. But I think coming back to it, absolutely right. This is a very different team. It's been said a lot about Roma. They're a much better side with Dybala in it than without. I think the same is true of Inter with Lautaro Martinez, because they're not getting many goals. If you take out Çalhanoğlu's penalties, which are the bulk of the goals beyond Lautaro's goals, then you don't have much at all. Mkhitaryan scored twice in the derby. I don't think he's scored since. Fratesi doesn't get on very much. Barella took until the game in Naples to get his first goal. So there's not actually... Whilst Inter do play this attractive football and they are very easy on the eye, there is a concern that if you keep Lautaro quiet or if he's unavailable, then they're not the same force. But I do feel that we are duty bound to keep this pod moving, and I think this title race is not only about Inter. There's also Juventus, who've
just a question, just one thing. Is it also the absence of Federico De Marco is also a problem going forward? Because that he is somebody who initiates a lot of movement going forward, and it facilitates the attacking movement in general. And with him absent, as well as Lautaro Martinez, and him not being really like available, that's also caused a problem. No.
Well, there's a question. There's an open question on that one, which is how immediately will Tejan Buchanan contribute, having joined the club. Canadian football, I've had a lot of interest in him because he's the first Canadian to play in Serie A, so it's an interesting story. And the honest answer is from his time at Bruges, it was an up and down, wasn't it? It started very well, and then last season less so. So I don't know how ready he's going to be to contribute, but I do think that's, when we talk about depth, an interesting piece of the puzzle going into this next part of the season for Inter.
Okay, are we going to gloss over the fact that Are we going to discuss the refereeing decisions, or are we going to just ignore
Absolutely.
that?
I think, let's talk Bastoni. So we had Alessandro Bastoni.
Easy one for me.
Is it a foul? Isn't it a foul? I think we're all in agreement.
Yeah, don't elbow people. It's a foul.
Okay, so everyone agrees it's a foul.
Yeah, Bastoni then goes on to hit the bar, which is directly contributes to the way the goal is scored when Barella knocks it back in. So I don't really understand all the controversy surrounding this. I think it should be open and shut. And even then, Verona, despite the fact that goal should have been disallowed, still had the chance to equalise. So I think some of it is on Verona for Henry missing the penalty. And I think Inter supporters can have no complaints if that goal were disallowed. It wasn't. And sometimes you just need to accept it and say, we got lucky, we got away with one, and these things will come around. No?
Perfectly said.
Mm-hmm.
Juventus, Mina, your favourite topic of conversation. The kids are all right again. This time it was Samuel Iling, brackets junior. I mean, we can debate as to whether the junior is necessary. I've never really understood that. Unless his father is called Samuel Iling, which I'm not sure he is. I don't think it's a double-barrelled surname, but that's my sort of niche bone of contention that I probably should have not really divulged on the pod. Anyway, let's move on. Samuel Iling, that was a very odd little tangent.
I feel like this is coming from a place, Patrick. We want to understand where this is coming from.
To me, your junior, if there's a famous senior, it was Frank Lampard Jr. initially because his dad had the same name, was still coaching. Then his dad became irrelevant because he just fell out of the graces of his brother-in-law, Harry Redknapp. And Frank Lampard became the prominent Frank Lampard, and he just became Frank Lampard. He was no longer Frank Lampard Jr. In America, they have Davis Love II, Davis Love III. Why is it Samuel Iling-Junior? And why is it spelled junior in full and it's not J-R?
Let me just look up his father's name.
Please do. Can we get to the bottom of this?
I was struggling with this because it's hyphenated often, which makes me think it's just his name. Like he might have had parents whose surname were Iling and Junior and they got married. I don't know the answer to that though. So
well, I debated that with someone who works at Juventus and they claim that is not the case. And I also had a very long conversation with James Horncastle about this, and he seemed to share my thoughts on it. So we haven't, someone needs to phone up Juventus press office and say, could you give us the birth certificate of Samuel Iling Junior? Is it, how junior is Samuel? Anyway, he scored the winning goal, but there was a bit of drama before all that. Giulio Maggiore. He scored the equalising goal, I should say. Dusan Vlahovic scored the winning goal. But that was character, wasn't it, shown by Juventus to come back. They'd gone from looking like they might be able to be winter champions, or at least be level with Inter if Thomas Henry had scored that penalty that he then fluffed. And there's a big psychological shift between, okay, now Inter are only 3 points ahead, we can go level with them by winning in Salerno, to, Inter have actually had a late penalty missed against them, we're 5 points behind, and we have to play second and win to go back to within 2 points. So do we feel we know anything more about Juventus' title credentials after this?
I think you asked me. Actually, I wasn't sure if you're going to come in, Mina, because you look like you're reading something.
I'm trying to check his father's name.
While you do that, Nikki.
Yeah.
I don't know if we learned anything new. I sort of think it was a really important win, a really impressive win. I think it was. I'm loving the energy of both Inter and Juventus in different ways at the moment. Just because we talked about it last week. Napoli winning the league was incredible. It was an amazing story. It felt like a once in a career type story to witness. But this feels like a race, whereas that didn't. And it's thrilling, like it's exciting, and seeing how Inter celebrated amidst the chaos and the difficult decisions was one energy. And then you got this game and you had the same sort of moment. You had players really sort of losing it a bit in a good way. And I enjoyed that. I think that Juventus sort of a fascinating discrepancy between the Coppa Italia, where they went 1-0 behind Salernitana and then just walloped them, and then this game where it felt for a long time like they weren't going to be able to. And as you've already said, the kids coming to the rescue, Samuel Iling-Junior with that, or just Samuel Iling, whichever you prefer, coming to sort of the rescue with the first goal, and then I suppose the man who needs to stand up on these occasions, and who is, I mean, can we still call him a kid? He's only 23 years old, Dusan Vlahovic, but who they need to stand up on these occasions, getting that last one, and then, again, like I say, the sort of all team celebration, taking the shirt off, even though you're going to get booked for it because you just can't control it. I don't know. It feels like they've got Fino alla fine back. That's what it feels like with Juventus. It feels like they've got back
I'm
their
so glad you
catchphrase,
said that,
and
because
they
it's
mean
become a
it.
real occupational hazard for us on commentary, because they keep doing this. And Cambiaso scored a last-minute winner against Verona. Gatti scored a last-minute winner against Monza. And now Vlahovic against Salernitana. There's only so many times that you can say filo a file, or you can come up with the English equivalent. They keep going right until the death. And so it's getting almost tired. You need to come up with new ways of saying that they're basically showing that Juventus spirit. And the Rain Man pedant in me feels obliged to say, I think Vlahovic has now turned 24, because I think he's born in late January 2000. Late
basically
January.
he's nearing
you're
retirement
right. He
age.
will turn 24 later this month. I'm getting ahead of myself. I thought we're the 9th of February. So there we go. So yes, 23 going on. I am 23 going on 24, scoring winning goals. Mina, Juventus.
So are we saying, because when Caviglia got his, start, I said that he's nearing retirement more than he is the youngster that's coming in. Vlahovic is something that Allegri keeps talking about. He's like, he's just a kid, so give him a chance. And I love him for protecting him, to be honest with you. But we should be expecting more at this age. We should be expecting more for the price. In general, I think that this doesn't answer that many questions, because it's going to take us a while before we really judge where and how Vlahovic is improving. I have tons of question marks about him, because it was dreadful first half from everyone, let's be honest. They didn't have a shot on target till the 70th minute or so. And at the end of the day, this was a team that didn't have Chiesa, Locatelli or Cambiaso in the starting lineup. I do appreciate that the one thing that I think is great about these old-time coaches, whether it's Mourinho or whether it's Allegri, is that you might have a lot of question marks over their tactics, but their team will always do something and will always play the full 90 minutes with a deep desire to get back in there. Because I believe, like, Roma have gotten 18 goals in the last 15 minutes of games, and when you look at Juventus right now, they are a side that will always know how to score goals at the very end. Interestingly, Pavoletti under Ranieri, maybe it's these old coaches who know how to inspire the team to score until the very end, or to finish the matches brilliantly. But I do think that if you see after every match, they go down the tunnel, and then they are greeted by the kitmen, by all the staff, and they're given high fives, they are hugged, everyone's screaming Forza Juve. There's a real love connection, a real desire to bring everyone together, and then they'll celebrate the guy who scores the goal. And it's always Danilo, who looks very professional and doesn't, he's head down and not celebrating like the rest of them. But I think that having these sort of little things available, which is having that it builds a team, right? It builds that desire to continue bonding, to continue wanting to fight for one another, to continue fighting till the very end. And it's different people. I mean, it's been Rabiot who's come up in the last minute to be really, to win. It's been Cambiaso, it's Vlahovic today. My main issue with Juventus is their desire to continue starting Kostic. I mean, what is that about, guys? What is that about? Why? Why do we have to see this guy every day? He's a Frankfurt player. Send him back to Eintracht Frankfurt.
Brutal. There was a nice little, a nice little moment between the old Frankfurt players, him and Ndika last week, when Kostic had that. He's finally going to get his first goal, and Ndika headed it off the line. It's like, come on, give me a break. What more does he have to do? The guy gambled and headed it off the line. Nikki, what more does Vlahovic have to do? I mean, it depends on what our expectations are for Vlahovic. Are they based on his potential that we saw at Fiorentina? Are they based on the price tag? Are we expecting him to emulate Cristiano Ronaldo at Juventus, which, let's be honest, is unrealistic? But surely the fact that he is scoring a winning goal when Juventus must win is progress. No, it's positive. I mean, you can say what you like about his overall performance, but surely that's what he's in the side to do first and foremost.
Yeah, it's sort of this impossible situation Juventus set up for themselves, because they spent 70 million euros on him, and I think it was probably too much. I think at this point, you look at what he's achieved and you think, well, is that what you were expecting when you spent that? No, you probably wanted more. On the other hand, he started 12 games this season, scored 7 goals. I mean, that's not awful. There's lots of strikers who would look at that and go, that's not a terrible return. It's not Lautaro Martinez's return. It's not what you might want for your 70 million euros. But he's kind of doing what he needs to. I think he's sort of above the threshold of what I think is bare minimum on a team of a team that doesn't play particularly attacking football. He's sticking the ball in the net enough, and I think that's sort of the situation Juventus have. Have they got the elite world-class striker they hoped they were getting? I don't think so. Is he going to become that striker? I'm skeptical because I think he lacks some technical things in his game that perhaps you look for. Can he be good enough for a team that wins Serie A? Yes. Do I think he's capable of doing it in Europe? Well, we're not seeing this season, but I think he's capable of scoring at this sort of rate in Europe, and so I think he's got the potential to be a useful player at a time when it's really hard to buy strikers without spending more than 100 million euros now. To buy a good striker who you know is going to do it for you, then.
Okay, Nikki, actually, this is an interesting question just because here's the thing. How do we judge a great striker? Is it by the amount of goals that they stick in or by what they do in the final third? Because this is I don't really like the amount of abuse that sometimes Jesus gets at Arsenal. You know, I mean, he's a player who really contributes in the final third. He's not a player that necessarily scores with the level of consistency that you would want for your striker, you know? And so Karim Benzema wasn't a guy that scored a bunch of goals. He was my favorite striker. I'd rather have him over Lewandowski any day of the week. You know, even at their top and their prime when Lewandowski was brilliant, I'd still rather have Benzema. And this is my issue with Vlahovic, is that it's not that he's not just a consistent number 9, because that's what he does. He doesn't do enough in the final third that I think that brings everyone in either.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, because I was thinking, you know, in some ways what I think fits with Vlahovic at Juventus is it's an Allegri team. They want to be muscular. They want to be sort of physical and dominate teams that way. And he looks the part. He has got that physicality to him. He can dominate defenders. But then the sort of comparison that popped into my mind is, I suppose what maybe your ideal is that he develops into a Mario Mandzukic, but he's not as technically good. He just isn't. He hasn't got that same finesse in his game. He's never going to score.
Mandzukic as well, isn't he? You know, just the way he moves.
So he's a £20 million striker. So he's a £20 million striker.
No, you have to pay more.
What year are you shopping in? I think you're shopping for strikers in 2002.
Yeah,
he's a £20 million striker.
Okay, that you're right. I mean, that's too much.
What inflated the fee was.
But you're telling me he's not technically good. You're telling me he doesn't score consistently.
No, but he does score quite consistently. 7 goals in 12 starts is not bad. It's really not.
For a number 9 who doesn't offer that much, then you should be showing me like
how many chances do Juventus create?
I'm saying isn't where would you price the guy?
Again, it's the chicken or the egg.
Right.
Is he not scoring because he doesn't offer enough in the final third, or is he not scoring enough because Juventus don't create enough opportunities for him to put in the back of the net? I think if we're saying...
Well, here's the thing. We've had 13 different strikers. 13
There's
different...
one player in Serie A who's scored double figures. One. Literally, it's Lautaro.
Can we sort of expand the net wider to include the right winger for Sassuolo, Domenico Berardi, the best player in Serie A for the last decade? Can we sort of
Well, he's scored 9.
Can we just broaden the net slightly?
Which is better.
There's how many players have scored 9 or more goals?
But here's the thing: there isn't even an individual. But then that's another thing about sort of players like Candreva or Berardi is that they can create something out of nothing and just score a ridiculously great goal. I mean, even Bonaventura can just score in a moment of magic. And that's something that I'm trying to say this without using the rude word. When something hits the fan, you need somebody to just do or create a moment of magic, and I think that this is what I expect from an 80 million.
But he's playing with his back to goal.
I'm not saying that I appreciate that. I think it's the wrong. I think it's the wrong team for him. It's a little bit like I do think he will succeed somewhere else. I really do. I just think with the way that Allegri plays, maybe it is that. Maybe it is the fact that he just can't do what it is that Juventus need him to do. Which again is my issue: is that if you are a good number 9, you fit in everywhere. Giroud is somebody who's been consistently criticized throughout his career, and yet he has gone to every team and managed seamlessly to play beautiful and wonderfully and consistently and effectively. You know, this is what happens when you're a good player. You just seamlessly move into the team and can produce. And I think that what we need to say about Vlahovic is that he might be brilliant for a better team. a team that creates a lot of opportunities, but you have to be brilliant to be able to fit into every team. And he's not that.
I have one separate, completely different thought on this match I just wanted to ask. So Salernitana obviously are managed by Pippo Inzaghi, brother of Simone Inzaghi. Do you reckon there was a phone call at full time from Simone? You got to the 90th minute here that you were going to stop our title rivals from taking 3 points. And then you blew it.
He did look absolutely raging when he trudged off Pippo Inzaghi. I think it was more with the officials, to be honest. But because I think there was Salernitana had complaints, didn't they, in the build up to Maggiore's red card that there had been a foul prior to that or something. But yeah, it's a weird dynamic, that, isn't it? It'll be interesting to see what. Pippo's the older brother, I think, isn't he?
Yeah,
yes,
he is,
yeah.
but by 2 years, no? I mean, how old would he be? Like 50?
50. Yeah, 50.
So does he look the same age as J-Lo? Or he looks like he's...
J-Lo is just a law.
I feel like he's going
through it.
I mean, J-Lo can't be the benchmark for 50-year-olds, surely. I mean, J-Lo looks like a 30-year-old. Yeah. I mean, that's just not fair.
But I do feel like Pippo has aged really quickly in the last 2 years. I don't know how to explain, because I haven't seen any of him last season, right?
Yeah.
But then you look at Simone Inzaghi, and he looks like a young man.
Winning
like,
trophies.
I mean, he doesn't look like he's just a couple of years younger than Pippo, and I feel like Pippo's gone through it. And I felt a bit like, oh, that's I feel like he needs a good night's rest, and I don't think being the coach of Salernitana is a great thing for him. Although I'm not trying to shame him, that sounds so awful, but I'm just saying, like, I was quite surprised, but there was a lot of fight in Salernitana. I feel like this is a team that, if it plays like that consistently, can maybe save itself, to be honest with you. Like, I always refer to them as the worst team in Serie A, and I don't know whether it's them or Verona, but I think both of them have actually a lot of fight in them. And this is what I really like about Serie A. I think that there's no great team. Well, maybe Inter is a great team, but we're not saying that at the moment. I love producer Simon's reaction
just
to it.
A real grimace there of disgust. How dare you suggest Inter a great team?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe not, but either way, the one thing that everyone always talks about the Premier League is everyone can be everyone, and I genuinely think that's true of Serie A now, which is great.
Yeah, and I think Salernitana have got a good chance now. They've got rid of Morgan De Sanctis and brought back Walter Sabatini to do the recruitment side of things. He was the architect of their great escape under Davide Nicola. So it depends how much room for manoeuvre they have in terms of budget and all of that sort of stuff. But it's a great story.
And how well his health.
Yes, chain smoking probably isn't the best course of action, I think, when you do.
And he's in hospital now.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if he's too old for this game anymore.
Well, you only need a phone, I think, as a sporting director. Italians have taught us there. But I would say, statistically, it does look like we've got two great teams at the halfway stage. I mean, 48 and 46 points from 19 games is an astonishing record. I think there's an argument to say that both Inter and Juventus will be slightly aggrieved. Juventus, because they've got 46 points and yet they're only second. And Inter, they've got 48 points. And I think most people would agree that they play the best football in Serie A and they look the most convincing team in terms of when they win convincingly, the Verona game notwithstanding. And so I think, as you said, Nikki, I think we could be in for a really good title race, which could be similar to the one we saw when Milan beat Inter to the league by a couple of points. But Serie A is not only about the top two.
Put your money on it.
Okay.
Who's winning? Who's winning, guys? Who's winning? Come on.
I would say, just by a law of averages alone, third time lucky for Simone Inzaghi. I think they're just about going to do it.
I've said Inter all along, so I'm going to stick with it. But I week by week become less convinced of my argument, and I do think it's extraordinary. You talk about just efficiency, just sheer efficiency, to have won 14 out of 19 games as Juventus have, with only one loss, and your goal difference is only plus 17. I mean, that is about as efficient as you can be to just win games one goal at a time. Like, that really is. There's barely any goals wasted. Whereas Inter, it does have that slight feeling of, have you sort of
peaked too
wasted
early,
all of your best energy, and you still haven't managed to shake rid of this lot? Because again, I just keep mentioning it. They've got the Supercoppa coming up in Riyadh, and then they're going to go into the Champions League. These are things that Juventus don't have to worry about. Juventus got a chance to even get ahead of them during the Supercoppa. It's going to be interesting.
Mina, you've got Juventus, presumably.
But Juventus are in the Coppa Italia. I don't. Superstition won't allow me to say
Wow, so
Juventus.
that is a resounding. That's a
um,
landslide win for Inter. Three experts, three
Inter.
self-described
No,
experts. have described them
I
as
still think it's
Juve.
Juve.
Mina
Look,
thinks you, but she just won't say it.
yeah, I mean, listen, I'm honestly, if Chanaloglu looks so exhausted at this point in the season, and I just know Inzaghi, and I know he's not going to throw on all the others, he's not going to give people chances, and it's going to be Di Marco until he has another injury, and it's going to be Lautaro Martinez. And here's the thing: the market will change things if Juve do get a midfielder, and if Inter somehow manage to get rid of Sanchez and bring in an actual striker that can replace. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the way that they're going now, I think Inter's going to be gassed pretty soon.
Well, we shall see as the second half of the
There we
season
go.
starts. Inter going to run out of steam, or will they hold on?
But I don't think Juve will win. It's about also Juve maintaining what they started, and I'm not sure they can either. So it's that. It is very strange. I don't know how to say it because I don't see either of them winning it. Imagine if Milan just manages to overcome both of them.
9 points back. Yeah, long way to go. But there's everyone else behind them, with the exception of Milan, who won quite easily in Empoli. None of them seem to want to finish in the top four, just when Fiorentina seemed to be impressing with that really great month of December. They lost against a Sassuolo team that had barely won any matches all season. I think they've gone 5 without a win. And what do we think about Fiorentina? I never know where we are with Fiorentina. Sometimes I think, okay, they've matured, and we were giving them a lot of praise recently. And just at that crucial opportunity with Roma playing Atalanta and Bologna dropping points elsewhere, Napoli will get onto. What's going on with Fiorentina, guys?
I'm really sorry I got distracted by something in the running dog.
Oh, everyone's getting distracted. That was another crazy VAR game, to be honest with you, where it's just, goals being chalked off or not being counted, and I don't know which one was right or which one was wrong. But I think that it goes down to Fiorentina don't have an exceptional squad. The fact that they are where they are is a true testament to what Italiano is currently doing at the moment. And so I think this is one thing that I do want to say to them, because they are going to get a lot of flag. But if I was them, I would go out and spend all my money on getting somebody who can actually score goals. And that's the issue that they have, that they just cannot score goals for the amount of opportunities that they create. And this is going to stop them going forward, because otherwise, in terms of the way they play, we know they can do something defensively. Monza, it's like a really bizarre team, because sometimes it shows up and sometimes it just refuses to show up. So I feel like it depends who the opponent is. But, I mean, just Fiorentina had 8 corners to Monza's 1, and they couldn't make any of them count. There's a real issue there from what they can create and what they actually translate. They are so inefficient. If they can combine with Juventus, it would be a super team, because we'd have one team that's scoring all the goals and one team that's creating everything. But they just, it's this whole thing that they need to somehow fix. And maybe Vlahovic deserves to go back just so that he can score a bunch of goals and then win top striker.
Did you mean to say Sassuolo, Mina? Did I hear you saying Monza?
Oh, sorry.
Pinamonti.
Why did I say
Pinamonti?
You're right. I give this whole speech about Monza. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Sassuolo. Sassuolo is the team that sometimes shows up and sometimes doesn't show up. And I can't figure it out. And Dionisi and everyone has talked about this being a transitional year for them. And I get that. It is a transitional year. It's not a team that I trust defensively either. Sassuolo are actually a lot like Monza, to be honest. But it's the issue with Fiorentina is that it really is just missing a great striker.
And they've tried. I mean, they've tried. They brought in Jovic and Cabral. That didn't work. And so they brought in Nzola and Beltran. And I actually think Beltran's been doing a bit better than Nzola. So it was Nzola back in the lineup for this one. Yeah, I mean, it's nailed it with Fiorentina. I think Vincenzo Italiano is getting more than the sum of his parts from what he's got there, but he hasn't got a goal scorer, and that is hurting them. Obviously, Bonaventura missed a penalty in this game as well. Consigli had a really great game in goal for Sassuolo, so things could have gone differently, but they aren't efficient enough up front.
And he is a cup specialist, Italiano, which segues nicely onto the fact that the Coppa Italia quarterfinals start tonight. Fiorentina against Bologna. Maybe they both dropped points because they had one eye on that. The ludicrously named Derby dell'Appennino, the Apennine Derby. Not really one that's caught the imagination. But perhaps Fiorentina can go one better. Semi-finals in Italiano's first season, finalists last season. They lost to Inter. They lost in the Conference League final as well. So maybe that's where they're best served, in the cup. But speaking about the cup, Napoli lost 4-0 to Frosinone in the cup. And they lost 3-0 to Torino in Serie A. Torino had scored 15 goals in 18 matches prior to this. Everyone's saying Torino don't score goals. They've got a bit better with Dusan Zapata. Walter Mazzarri should have returned. He did return, but he was sat sort of meekly in the stands because he was suspended after saying too much against Monza. And Niccolò Frustalupi, his assistant, took charge. But it was the same chaos. It was just dreadful. I did the game and it was embarrassing, and I don't think I've ever been so critical of a Napoli team in recent years on commentary than I was about that. It was, even when they lost 4-0 to Milan last season, when they were winning the title, there was all the surrounding circumstances with the supporter protest and against De Laurentiis when the crowd went quiet, etc. But this was just bizarre. Credit to Torino. We can't make it all about Napoli, but again, Napoli are the story. Is this the worst title defence we've ever seen in Serie A? Is it the worst title defence of all time in any league? No, Leicester City.
My
I
God.
guess.
That's such a like a high bar, yeah. Because now you've sort of got me on the spot thinking of ever, and Leicester is the one that comes straight to mind, of course, because it's a comparison between teams that perhaps aren't in the habit of winning the league as much. Although I think it's an imperfect comparison between Napoli and Leicester. I think Napoli have so much more often been at least close to the top of the table in the last few decades. Leicester's story came a bit out of nowhere. It's a horrendous title defense. It's a humiliating title defense. I thought, and I know producer Simon wanted to play us a clip of yours from the commentary this weekend where you called them donkeys. I'm sad I haven't been able to listen to it because for some reason it didn't work. I thought they were terrible, and it's reached this incredibly awkward point where you look around and go, I don't even know what the right way forward is, because I was completely on board with removing Rudy Garcia when they did, because Garcia was a strange appointment to begin with, and because you had an owner who'd been undermining him from the start anyway, so there was no help in that relationship. So I was on board with making that change, and I was skeptical of Walter Mazzarri, but willing to go along with this idea that, okay, you just get the traghettatore, you just get the ferryman, you get to the end of the season and that's okay. But they're not getting to the end of the season well. They're getting to the end of the season horrendously. They're not going to be relegated, because I think they probably need to win 2 more games this season not to get relegated. But they're not going to get anywhere near the Champions League if they keep playing like this. Will they finish in the top 10? And so
I think they're 9th now after that. 6 defeats from 10 games in all competitions under Mazzarri. I mean, that's damning.
I mean, they haven't scored in 4 games. Napoli haven't scored in 4 games. Napoli scored 77 goals, I think, last season. It's ridiculous how fast it's unraveling. So do you sort of then think, well, you have to do something? Maybe. But who are you going to hire? And of course, Antonio Conte was in the stands at this game, so everyone's looking his way. And as I said on the Guardian's Football Weekly just this morning, I'd kind of love to see that as a piece of performance art. I don't think it would end well, because De Laurentiis and Conte sounds like a recipe made in
hell?
the pits of football hell.
Maybe?
But it would be very entertaining.
Listen, it's weird, because if you look at the stats and you look at what's being done, I like with Walter Mazzarri, if you think that this is going to be like, as in, you might as well have stuck with Rudy Garcia at this point, because we're talking about Walter who's managed only 3 wins, a draw, and 6 defeats. He's averaging 1 point a game in comparison to Garcia's 1.7. Napoli, which is really not that much to talk about, but Napoli used to concede 0.8 in XG, and now they're conceding 1.5 in XG. I mean, there's just so many stats that really like doom them. I think the one that's most prevalent is the fact that even when they were losing to Torino, they went to a 5-man backline. And that's when they decide to start defending the loss. I'm not really, I mean, listen, Walter Mazzarri is not really like the coach that you want to lean on, but I also don't want to be horrible to him either, because I do feel that he hasn't had much time to try to do something special. He also hasn't had Victor Osimhen available to him because either of a red card or because of Pasquale Mazzocchi's moronic reaction from coming on. And this is something like João Felix, like you're so happy to be at a new club because you've hated your old experiences, or just because you really love this new club, and you come in and you get so excited and you do something really stupid and you get sent off. It happened with João Felix for Chelsea, and it's happened now for Mazzocchi at Napoli, you know, a Napoli born player. And I do feel sorry for Mazzari. He hasn't had time to do anything, and the team is a shadow of itself. I think it's really hard to live up to what Spalletti's been doing. But even when Spalletti didn't have Victor Osimhen available to him, the team weren't as brilliant. I think it's also hard in your second season when people start to understand what Kvaratskhelia can do, and then you just ensure that he's isolated when you try to defeat Lobotka and stop him carrying the ball forward, where he doesn't have the help of Anguissa to progress that ball forward, when for some reason they haven't had a fullback for ages, and Mario Rui's just come back, and Di Lorenzo's having one of the worst seasons in the world. And I think it's all just come at a wrong time, and I really don't know who to blame other than Di Laurentiis not having a nice conversation with Spalletti, making him feel like he is really important, giving him the credit that he deserved, and signing him to a 10-year deal.
I think he would have left regardless. I think he's quite an intelligent man, Spalletti, and I think he realised that he was never going to win another league title after this. I think it comes back to that whole thing about, you know, you've had a big meal, pancia piena, you know, and you sort of rest on your laurels a bit. I think we're always going to get that with this group of players in a club that's just not used to winning the league title. But
really, with Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia, you don't think?
I think Kim was such a huge piece that I think without Kim, unless you're able to find someone with a similar ability and similar impact, I always think it was going to be very difficult, because I think he was such a big part of how they played. I think, Kim and Kvara got the goals, but Kim just, they also had the best defence in Serie A as well. And so much of that was playing that high line, and Kim just had that ability to...
Okay, but if they kept Spalletti, would they have not just brought in another, great defender?
I think it comes back to what we were saying about Vlahovic before, about elite number 9s. How many elite centre-backs are there? Do you know what I mean? I think Kim's pace, it reminds me a little bit of Kyle Walker at Manchester City. You know, he just allows you to play that high line, and because you know he's able to then come back and track back and cover, and also he's quite willing to be left exposed 1-against-1, and he'll back himself. But we mentioned Antonio Conte. The way things are going this season for Napoli with unexpected names. We had Rudy Garcia, who was brought back into the fold after years away and anonymity with regards to the Italian game. Walter Mazzarri, who came back to Napoli 10 years later. Gian Piero Ventura was also in the crowd for the Torino-Napoli game. So I think there's probably more chance of Ventura taking over at Napoli than Walter Mazzarri. Can you imagine? He, the architect of the non-qualification for 2018 World Cup.
No, Patrick, Conte spoke to the fans and he said it could happen.
He loves to play hard to get, doesn't he, Conte? He's always just throwing those little crumbs out there. We'll get to the big game. The biggest game on paper, if not in reality. And this is a nod to producer Simon, who's wearing his Roma shirt today. So we would be negligent if we didn't touch upon Roma against Atalanta. I think on paper, well, in terms of context, probably the top two, wasn't it? Going for who was going to finish top at the halfway stage. But in terms of a crunch match, uno scontro diretto, I think it probably was Roma against Atalanta. And we have hammered Roma on this show. And I actually think that was one of their best performances I've seen in a long time. I thought 1-1 wasn't a particularly fair reflection of what we saw. Ultimately, it comes down to putting the ball in the back of the net. But I thought Roma created a lot of chances, and I thought Carnesecchi had a very good game. I don't know whether you guys saw it, whether you agree with that, or Atalanta took the lead after 8 minutes with Cope Mainer's Dybala scoring a penalty equaliser in half an hour. And then for the next 60 minutes, it was Roma looking more like scoring. They just couldn't get the goal.
I agree that they look more like scoring. I guess I don't know. I just find them such an exhausting watch. The midfield is so static. They're just not going anywhere. It's just sort of so reliant on that front two. And yes, perhaps a little bit with the wing backs kicking on. I thought Zalewski had a better game. But I don't know. Maybe I've sort of just reached a tipping point in my ennui with Roma. I don't know. This game, after what had been quite an entertaining weekend of Serie A games, I didn't enjoy it anywhere near as much as I thought I would. And so my feeling of whether or not Roma deserve more. I don't know. Maybe they were the slightly better team, but I find it hard to be enthusiastic for them at the moment.
Roma with Dybala are a team, and Roma without Dybala are in another team. So I think that's something that sort of we just regurgitate often, but it is very true. I agree with you. I think this is a better performance. I think that in general, perhaps I'm not somebody who often talks about Roma in glowing terms, and I'm always too quick to be like, oh, Jose Mourinho, and like noticing the flaws a little bit more. But I'm not. I think it's a fair result, and I'm almost too scared to say it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think they're on par as teams. I think Atalanta and Roma are on par as teams. I do think Roma do very well when they're playing at home, and they are a team that I will fear a lot, but I would fear Atalanta as much. So I think on paper, if either of those teams were coming up for me, I would be scared of each of them equally. I think there's good in one team and there's bad in another, and I do expect a little bit more, I guess, when Lookman is valuable for Atalanta, and not being available is another question for them. But yes, this is a better performance from them as playing at home. But I do think at the end, I thought this was a fair result.
Someone.
Can I do what Mina did at the halfway point of the show and say, money on the table, who are you taking for fourth spot? Because I think no one's going to disagree that it goes in some combination Inter, Juve and Milan. Then who's fourth? And in the end, it might be 5 Champions League spots. We can hope. But if it's 4, who do you think it's going to be? Because I think it's so unclear at the moment. Lazio.
I think they've got the best coach.
Well, they're ahead of Roma now. No, I'm joking.
I genuinely think it might be Lazio.
I mean, look, they've been a lot better. They've been a lot better recently, to be honest with you.
I don't trust any of those other teams.
But no,
I think it might be Lazio. I'm going with Lazio.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Atalanta.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go with Atalanta. I actually think that if you same sort of reason, not that he's perfect, but I think that coaching and Gasperini is what makes me think they'll get there. I mean, if I was going purely on coaching, I might go with Bologna and Motta, but I think Bologna still have a talent gap to catch up that is meaningful enough that I'll lean towards Atalanta instead.
Sorry, guys. Did you listen to what Sani said about the Coppa Italia? I don't know why everything he says is like gold for me. It's like I love this man so much. Yeah, when he's like, "Well, it's the Coppa Italia. We don't really care about it."
He's had a real bone to pick with the Coppa Italia for years. I remember when I was covering. I was covering Serie A first season, 2013-14, he was Empoli boss, and he said the Coppa Italia is the least democratic football competition in world football. It's worse than some of the formats they have in South America. I don't know why he needed to go there with the South American comparison. But, yes, from Sarri to Mourinho, sent off again. People keep asking me, and apparently there is no reliable data on this, how many times Mourinho has been sent off in his 2.5 seasons with Roma. It's a lot. I think we've seen a lot of Salvatore Forti taking charge. We saw Bruno Conti as well at Verona earlier this season. But he was sent off, and we're speaking about Pippo Inzaghi aging badly. Surely Mourinho's aged badly. I mean, he used to be so just well put together, didn't he? But now he's a little bit jowly and haggard and white hair. Am I being harsh? Are we getting a bit too offensive here?
Yeah, he's one. I don't know. I mean, I do feel like it must be very hard to be Mourinho at the moment, because it's just you live in this world where you have to constantly fight.
That's of his own making, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I also think that it's what sells tickets. Like there's beauty to Mourinho in another way. Like he's the only one that packs out the stadium day in and day out. Like everyone loves this guy. I mean, he's crazy, but he brings eyeballs to Roma. He makes sure that the team, for somehow everyone still talks about Roma. They're 8 points behind where they were last season at this point. They're 8 points behind. And I that's a lot. That's a big difference from, and this is a team that added Lukaku. And so I would have thought that if anything, they would at least be level, in terms of points as to where they were at this point last season, but they're not. And I do think that there's a lot that needs to be talked about the way they approach this market, because Thiago Pinto did this wonderful interview with James Horncastle of The Athletic, and in it he talks about, everyone laughs, like no one ever thought that we'd have Lukaku and Dybala. That's brilliant, but Dybala is basically in hospital more than he is on the playing field, and Lukaku can't do much when he doesn't have the influence around him of creativity. And you've got Pellegrini, who's always injured, and there's Renato Sanchez and all of that to add into it. There needs to be serious conversations about the way the market is approached and about the way they want to go forward. Because otherwise, I think they're always going to be at this level, which is great because Mourinho's selling tickets, Mourinho's winning cup games, Mourinho could make it to another final. And I think Mourinho is an added value in that sense. But long-term strategy for them, is this a bit like, we're going to do all of this and then have a little bit of a Juve effect where we just drop after that, and then we start from scratch with youth and all of this business?
Yeah, I think Mourinho remains a divisive figure. Again, it's, are Roma better off with Mourinho there because of his profile and his visibility, or would they be better off with someone who's a slightly more calming influence that allows them just to try and develop and grow as a club and start to identify how they want to progress? I'm conscious of time. We did mention that it is the Fiorentina-Bologna game to open up 4 matches in the Coppa Italia quarterfinals, only a week on from the round of 16 conclusion. Wednesday is a double-header, big game between Milan and Atalanta. That's the late game. Earlier than that is the Rome derby. So Lazio against Roma. Who can forget the 2013 final when Senad Lulic scored and spawned his own line of apparel? Lulic 71, Lulic 71, the minute in which he scored the winning goal for Vladimir Petkovic's side against Aurelio Andreazzoli's Roma. That's one for the quiz question. And the final tie is on Thursday between Juventus and Frosinone, who toppled Napoli in the previous round. So I think that's all for now.
At least we know. I think that at least it means that because it's a derby, that Sarri will actually care about this match. So I look forward to watching it, and I look forward to coming back and discussing all of this with you guys next week. Thank you to everyone for listening to us. Reminder to Chronicles Tifosi Patreons to join the Tifosi chat in the Patreon app. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. All links are in the show notes. Other than that, thank you very much. We will come back to you, as always, with either an answer to a question or a voice note. And we'll speak to you next week. Ciao for now.
Serie A Chronicles is a Chronicles production.